Welcome to the Indie Author Method daily newsletter on Sundays when you have a little bit more time with your weekend, when you have some time to settle down, spend some time with your craft. We sit down with an indie author to talk about their craft and their process of writing. And this week, I'm so excited. I've got Alexander Richter. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with me, to talk with our followers and our subscribers to the Indie Author Method newsletter, who get a daily newsletter every single day in their inbox on writing tips from other famous writers and things like this interview series. I've got first question for you. I've got a copy of your book here, The Victorian Vigilante. I was so excited when it came out because it was available on Amazon Kindle, and was able to snatch up a copy as soon as it came out. Kind of give our viewers background on you and the book.
Yeah, this is my second book that I've released so far. It's kind of a different take from the first one. First one was more of a fantasy in the lens of like C.S. Lewis. So I decided to darken things up a little bit and go with historical fiction. I got into it pretty heavily in the pandemic. I was reading a lot of historical fiction, like The Berlin Girl, just like a lot of World War II era fiction. And I kind of dipped into some Victorian period. And I was just captivated by the amount of area where you can write a story. Sherlock Holmes, Jack the Ripper was super interesting vibe. This book is set actually 1 year before all of those killings happened, so it kind of gave me some time to play with things. Historical fiction is kind of interesting in the fact that you can kind of make it your own with also representing the material or the actual events. So I think there's like a lot of freedom. So this book, I think in all reality, I'm not sure if you saw the Robert Pattinson Batman, but I saw that makeup on his eyes when he takes off his mask, and I'm like, dang, that looks really cool. What if that was a woman? What if that was a woman and this was Victorian London, and that opening scene from the Robert Downey Sherlock Holmes is how I enter my book. And it just kind of grew from there. I was inspired by a lot of different franchises. I kind of pull a lot of my stuff from movies. I mean, I get stuff from comics, I get stuff from books, but I really wanted to kind of stitch things that I liked a lot together. So there's Egyptian mythology in this book. There's the detective aspect, and then there's also the vigilante aspect. So that's pretty much what came to be this. So all of those things came into the melting pot, and it was really fun to write. I was fortunate to be working from home during that period of time, so I had a lot of extra time to work this story down. I wrote large lengths of it at hand, so with a fountain pen, and I feel like that really added to the vibe of what I was going for. So
I love that. I'm a fountain pen writer myself.
Yeah.
So I love that. What
Yeah,
are some of the things you learned? Let me ask you this. What are some of the things you learned going from your first book, and especially like in your process, in your writing process, and how you learned to write essentially? What are some of the things you learned between that first and second book? What kind of things did you take away, whether good or bad, or lessons learned from the difference in that first novel to your second one?
Yeah, I think the first thing anyone ever writes, I don't want to say I made a mistake, but I definitely, writing your first book is a very humbling experience. I think it's an experience that is just to prove that you can do it. Like, you can commit to something and finish it. And I won't say my first book is not good. I will say I learned a lot from it as far as, grammatical stuff, the show versus tell. I remember I've gone back to reread sections of it, and some of it is like very painful to get through just because I feel like the craft has definitely improved. And I think the shift from book one to book two is just allowing the space in between drafts. With book one, I just spent year or 2 or 3 years just grinding out drafts and not allowing that space between the drafts to kind of cleanse my palate, to kind of come back with a fresh set of eyes. I took like 6 months away from the third draft of this book, and then reread it, and I had almost forgotten what it was about. So I kind of read it as a reader. Not saying that you need to wait 6 months, but it's really nice to have a breakaway so that you can kind of refocus. It was a really interesting experience. Obviously, the first draft I wrote, or my first novel, I wrote all on my own. I didn't really let anyone read it. I didn't let anyone beta read it. So it was, as it was, I thought it was a masterpiece. And it comes back to this idea we see in movies all the time, where a character sits down, writes a book, and within a day they finished it, and it's just this beautiful masterpiece. And that's just not the reality of things.
Not how that happens. Yeah.
No. There's a scene in Limitless that the character writes an entire book, and it's just this bestseller. And I always joke about myself with that I had those ideas coming into it. So I think that in between was a very humbling experience to take a step back and be like, okay, I know I can write a book, but now I need to work on making it flow, working on story structure. I went back to the basics and kind of Save the Cat Writes a Novel, really honed in on what are the story structures of a book, how do they need to work. So I really tried to do more research, and because it's a historical fiction novel, I was buying books, maps, history books, just things that I could chew on so that I would have that language and that atmosphere to work with. So I feel like a lot more research, but the plus side of it being a historical fiction is I didn't have to make anything up, really. Fantasy is you're pulling things out of nowhere. At least I had a source material to work with. So yeah. I think that really helped me out to not have to world build for years to try to figure out a magic system that works. This is just things that are established. You can really play with it.
You know, I think that's why I've never tackled or had the desire to tackle fantasy, is I simply don't have the imagination for that. My imagination and my storytelling is all very grounded. But listening back to your answer there, I mean, you're checking off every single box for the indie author method here. I mean, you're talking about taking time between drafts. You're talking about, taking space in between drafts. You're talking about Save the Cat Writes a Novel. This is everything that the newsletter subscribers have heard from us. So it's really cool to hear another indie author talk about these things that we send out on a daily basis. What is your writing process like then? What do you sit down every single day? How do you do this?
Yeah, so currently my writing process is I'm an early morning writer. I like to get it out before I do the rest of my day. So I just picked up a free write. So that's a distraction-free typewriter, essentially. And I usually write about 1,000 words a day. Sometimes I'm a little bit more fortunate and I exceed that, but I think 1,000 words is a very easy limit for me because within 3 months I have a first draft, and that way I can kind of tackle it. But yeah, so 7 to 8 o'clock is typically when I do most of my writing. I will come back during a lunch period to see if I can get some more stuff out. But yeah, every day I've found that when I skip days, story bits start to get lost, and then you're trying to remember what happened previously. And with the system that I'm working now, I can't go back to review what I've written the previous day. It makes it pretty difficult. So keeping that fresh on my mind is super important to continuing the continuity of the story. So I definitely recommend writing, even if it's 500 words a day, just make sure it's a daily habit. It has improved my prose and my story dramatically. So yeah, definitely every day in the morning. I cannot write at night. I'm too tired. I'm tired by like 9. So that's definitely not a thing for me.
Yeah, no, I'm 2 hours ahead of you. It's 9 o'clock here, and I'm done for the day because I'm the same way. I'm an early morning writer, and the exact same thing. 1,000 words a day, whatever I'm drafting. I'm not right now. Book is off to editing, but it's 1,000 words a day, 5 days a week. I take off weekends, come back fresh on Monday. But in 4 months, it's 16 weeks. I have an 80,000 word first draft.
Yes.
What's your biggest piece of advice for an aspiring author who says to you, Alex, I love your book and I have an idea or I want to start writing this idea too. Where do I start? Where do I begin? What do you say to that aspiring or prospective author?
I think the most important thing that I wish I would have gotten when I started is I've kind of touched on it a couple of times, but just to start it and just finish it. A lot of times we get in when we start something new, we hit that 20,000 word wall. And then it's like, I don't know where my story goes from here. So I would just say, see it out. Like, even if it's painful, just continue to see where it goes. If you write a book and you're not in love with it at the end, you can always write another one. You can always do another draft. I think what's really important is just to see it through. I think there's this idea that, you know, people want to be authors, but they don't necessarily realize the work that goes into something. We read books that are just absolutely fantastic, and they're so, like, I think of even like the Harry Potter books, they're so easy to read. It just seems so simple. The language, it flows, the sentence flow, that all comes later. It's not something you need to worry about now. I was actually in a debate about this with someone on my YouTube channel who believes that first drafts need to be edit worthy or caught to be shipped to your editor worthy. And I would strongly say that your first draft is just you telling yourself the story. You still have to make, I think Neil Gaiman said that, but you're trying to tell yourself what is happening. And once that's done, then you can go back and redo things. But I think the biggest thing is to just see it through. You can never finish a book unless you put the work in to finish it. And it feels like a grind, but it's so rewarding once it's done and you have other people reading it.
Man, that is, again, you are preaching to the choir over here. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. Alex,
Yeah.
where can our viewers find you? Where can they find Victorian Vigilante?
Yeah, so my Victorian Vigilante is exclusively on Amazon at the moment. There is a paperback and a hardback. I think right now my paperback is just $9.99 or $10.99. So I'm running a promo on that. And then right now for the next couple days, my Kindle version is free. So there's a promo on that. And then it just jumps up to the normal rate. If you want to stay updated with what I'm doing, Alexander Writes _ is my Instagram. That's typically where I keep people posted as far as when things are coming out. And I do have a link tree in my bio with all of my other works as far as The Shadow of Our Stars and the Victorian Vigilante, as well as a blog that I occasionally post, but not as often as I probably should. So
Not daily like us.
I don't have the time, so no.
Alex, thank you again so much. The Victorian Vigilante out on Amazon now. Find Alex online. Instagram is where I found you. You've been a great follow. I would love to talk to you again sometime again soon about that free write device.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thanks, Alex. Again, Indie Author Method. Thank you, Alex.